This story did not begin with images of celebrities, nor with leaked high-profile names, but with quiet voices that went unheard at the time. Underage girls moved between closed locations, files were opened and then closed, and testimonies were officially recorded. Yet not all of them made it into a courtroom. Here, we are not talking about a scandal, but about a recurring pattern of criminal behavior that continued and then stopped at boundaries whose reasons were never disclosed. The case, known internationally as Epstein Island, revealed, through its legal proceedings, crimes of trafficking minors and systematic sexual abuse, confirmed by evidence, confessions, and settlements. Yet beyond what was officially established, a broader space of testimonies remains. Victim statements, overlapping accounts, and circulated clips that were never fully adjudicated, not necessarily due to their weakness, but because the investigations did not go further than they did. This video is not intended to shock, nor to repeat the names involved. Its purpose is to refocus on the victims. How were they lured? How were they transported across states and countries? What commonalities appear in their testimonies? And precisely where did the process, which should have led to justice, stop? We will open the file of the Island Without Trials, presenting the crimes that have been condemned and proven, listening to the recorded testimonies, and examining the gray area that remains unresolved. In the end, we confront one unavoidable question. Why did the truth reach this far and then stop? What was judicially established in the case of Jeffrey Epstein leaves no room for ambiguity. The core crimes were trafficking in minors and systematic sexual assaults, not isolated or singular incidents. This confirmation did not stem from a single account or a journalistic investigation, but from confessions, indictments, and legal settlements that extended over years, creating a clear legal framework for what had occurred. The first legally closed chapter appeared with Epstein's 2008 conviction on charges related to the sexual exploitation of minors in the state of Florida. Despite the wide controversy surrounding the nature of the plea deal at that time, the confession itself confirmed the elements of the crime: underage victims, a repeated pattern of recruitment, and sexual exploitation in exchange for money. This admission did not erase the crime, it merely confined it legally within narrow boundaries, which later allowed for the reopening of the case in civil court. In subsequent civil lawsuits, the pattern of trafficking became unmistakably evident. Under U.S. legal definitions, trafficking in minors does not necessarily require crossing international borders. It is sufficient for there to be transportation, harboring, or recruitment of a minor for the purpose of sexual exploitation. Court documents revealed that the minors were recruited through similar methods and then moved among multiple locations owned by Epstein, placing these acts squarely within the framework of trafficking, not isolated assault. The second confirmed element is systematic rape. The testimonies accepted by courts and legal bodies did not describe a single incident, but a chain of repeated events. The victims' young ages, the absence of legal consent, and the use of money or promises as instruments of coercion. It was this repetition that gave the cases their weight, transforming them from individual claims into an established criminal pattern. It was also proven that these crimes were not confined to a single site. The judicial record documented the use of multiple properties across the United States, alongside locations abroad, all operating within one system. This geographical distribution was not a minor detail. It was a factor that enabled the crimes to continue, making it harder for victims to report and for authorities to connect the dots quickly. Alongside the criminal convictions, the civil settlements further confirmed the scale of harm. Accepting a settlement does not mean the crime did not occur. Rather, it implies an implicit acknowledgement of its occurrence in exchange for ending the legal dispute. In these cases, the settlements represented legal recognition that there were real victims and that the harm they suffered was genuine and provable before a court of law. Judicial records and verified testimonies show that these crimes did not happen in just one place, nor were they limited to a local area. Instead, they took place within an organized system of transfers that effectively turned assaults into coordinated exploitation. This was not random movement. It followed a recurring pattern combining recruitment, transportation, and accommodation, aligning with the legal definition of trafficking. Testimonies indicate a consistent pattern. Girls were recruited from different states, often with promises of small payments, temporary jobs, or general offers of assistance. They were then moved to properties managed by Jeffrey Epstein, either within the same state or across different states. These transfers were not just logistical steps, they were a key method of maintaining control. Removing victims from familiar surroundings reduced the chance of reporting and increased isolation. Records show that private flights were central to this system. Short trips between states, and sometimes internationally, were presented as part of work or visits, while in reality, they redistributed victims across multiple locations. Repeated use of air travel allowed the perpetrators to operate away from local authorities' oversight. The documents also show that multiple locations were used intentionally, not by accident. Houses in various states, international properties, and even a private Caribbean island formed a network of rotating locations. This distribution made it hard to connect incidents initially, making each event appear separate, even though they were part of a continuous pattern. Legally, this method changes how the crimes are classified. Transporting and reaccommodating minors, or exploiting differences in state jurisdictions, shifts the offenses from local assaults to organized cross-state exploitation. It is not necessary for this movement to be international. What matters is that transportation was used as a tool for systematic exploitation, as confirmed by testimonies and records. Importantly, these transfers were coordinated within an organized network to maintain continuity. Schedules, arrangements, and intermediaries ensured that victims were moved between locations on short timelines, preventing stability and maintaining control. In this context, the crimes were not merely repeated assaults. They were part of a structured system designed to prolong exploitation and reduce the risk of discovery. Understanding the system of transfers clarifies how these activities could continue over years without being stopped after initial reports. This leads naturally to the victims' testimonies. What did they say when officially allowed to speak, and what patterns appeared in their accounts across different locations and years? When the victims' testimonies were transferred into official frameworks, they ceased to be mere individual accounts and instead became a map of exploitation with identical patterns. Despite the passage of years and the difference in locations, the statements recorded by the Federal Bureau of Investigation, FBI, and the civil testimonies given under oath revealed a single operational pattern that did not change. This body of documentation derived its strength not only from the shocking nature of its content, but from the systematic repetition that transformed scattered incidents into a coherent structure of conviction, one that is difficult to doubt or dismiss. The first recurring element in these testimonies is age. The majority of victims were clearly below the legal age, and some statements specified ages in the mid-teens or even younger. This factor was not incidental. It was central to the legal characterization of the crime, as it nullifies any claim of consent and automatically places the acts within the framework of sexual exploitation of minors. The second element is the method of luring. The testimonies intersect on beginnings that seem simple: offers of financial assistance, temporary jobs, or services whose nature was never fully explained. At this stage, direct force was not used, rather, deception. This approach, as described in the testimonies, made the victims enter the circle without full awareness of what was to follow. The third element is the pattern of control. Upon arrival at the location, the testimonies describe a rapid shift from ambiguity to forced clarity. Rules imposed, roles assigned, and the use of money or gifts as a means of pressure. Some victims spoke of a feeling of complete isolation, especially when they were far from their home states or kept within enclosed spaces. This psychological control more than direct physical violence was what prevented immediate reporting. The testimonies also share a consistent description of repetition. The officially recognized statements did not describe a single assault, but repeated abuses occurring within short periods of time. This repetition is what gave the testimonies their legal strength, transforming them from individual narratives into a sequence of incidents pointing to a fixed and deliberate pattern, not an accidental deviation. Most importantly, these testimonies were not recorded in one setting or before a single entity. Some came during criminal investigations, others in subsequent civil lawsuits, and some were resubmitted years later. This chronological and thematic consistency granted the testimonies a weight that does not rest on the credibility of one individual, but on the accumulation of converging narratives. Alongside the officially recorded statements, the case entered a far more bewildering space through videos and filmed testimonies that spread outside the courts. These materials were never introduced as convicting evidence, yet they were never refuted either. They appeared, shocked, and were then left without any publicly declared path of verification, becoming a direct test of the investigation's limits rather than evidence of guilt. Among the clips that stirred wide controversy was a video featuring a woman named Gabriela Rico Jimenez, identified online as a Latin American model. She appears in a state of intense panic, speaking in a trembling voice and making extremely severe accusations, including claims about the brutal harm done to some of her friends. The video spread rapidly, after which the account that posted it disappeared, and its subject never reappeared in any public investigation or media context that could either confirm her identity or disprove her account. This disappearance, not merely the content of the video itself, became an additional reason for its continued circulation. Digital platforms also circulated footage showing group sexual acts in unclear contexts with unfamiliar visual elements, dim lighting, smeared bodies, and movements suggesting ritual organization. Accompanying comments claimed links between these clips and mysterious rituals, yet the videos themselves contained nothing that allowed for legal attribution to a specific place or time, nor any publicly available technical evidence connecting them to a particular incident. What can be described with certainty is that the content is shocking and that the claims of connection have remained without any publicly verified investigation. Why did so many people believe these materials? First, because of partial overlap with verified testimonies that described closed spaces, isolation, control, and environments operating beyond oversight. Second, because the appearance of these videos coincided with waves of official leaks, creating a widespread sense that the truth was being revealed in stages. Third, because the absence of a detailed institutional denial left a vacuum, one that public circulation filled instead of official verification. Here emerges the decisive difference between description and proof. A video, no matter how extreme, does not become a convicted incident without a clear sequence of verification, establishing identity, conducting an independent technical examination, documenting place and time, and then proceeding through a judicial process that publicly tests the claim. In this case, that sequence was never announced. There were no official statements detailing technical examination, and no investigative results that closed the debate through either conviction or dismissal. What is more troubling is that this void was not an exception, but a pattern. Investigations treated incidents in fragments, one file here, one statement there, without building a comprehensive case that connected the similar testimonies. Many proceedings ended in settlements that resolved the dispute without full public hearings, leaving core questions outside judicial scrutiny. And with overlapping jurisdictions between states and nations, procedural complexity shifted from being a temporary obstacle to becoming an unspoken ceiling for investigation. In this sense, the problem lies not only in the existence of shocking videos, but in what did not happen afterward. No public investigations were announced to sufficiently address these materials, no independent examination results were presented to the public, and no explanation was given for the silence that followed. Silence does not prove the allegations, but it does not protect the truth either. Instead, it prolongs doubt and transforms these clips into permanent fuel for speculation. Conclusion: this case does not end with a name, nor stop at an island, nor close with a single verdict. What was uncovered in the Epstein affair confronts us with a simpler yet harsher truth. The crimes were proven, the testimonies were recorded, but justice was never completed. Between what was officially condemned and what remained confined within statements, the voices of the victims have endured, louder than any decisive ruling. At its core, the case is not a question of how horrific the events were, that much is already clear, but of the limits of what the investigation was allowed to reach. Why were the incidents fragmented instead of consolidated? Why were paths closed before being publicly tested? And why did such grave testimonies remain without full judicial confrontation? These questions do not accuse any single institution, but they expose an institutional void where justice should have stood. And the final question remains, one that extends beyond this case alone. If justice stopped here, who can guarantee that it will not stop at the same point in the cases to come?